I dedicated 40 years of my life to my son, Marcus. I sacrificed everything: my marriage, my dreams, even sold my family heirlooms, all to give him opportunities I never had. I paid for private schools, funded his college education, and gave him the down payment for his first home. But when my restaurant chain went bankrupt during the pandemic, he didn't hesitate to tell me I had become a burden. "We don't have room for you here, Mom," he said coldly, as if those decades of sacrifice meant nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What he didn't know was that while my American business had failed, my offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands were quietly holding millions, money that would now go to someone who actually deserved it. I still remember the day I brought Marcus home from the hospital in the spring of 1980. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine as I carried him into our modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I was just 23, working 2 jobs, waitressing during the day and bookkeeping at night, while my husband Richard pursued his big break in music that never seemed to materialize. We were barely scraping by, but I was determined to give my son everything I never had growing up. My own childhood had been marked by instability. My parents moved constantly, chasing jobs across the Midwest, never settling long enough for me to make friends or feel secure. I swore Marcus would have a different experience: a stable home, quality education, and the certainty that he was loved and supported unconditionally. When Marcus was 3, Richard left us. "This family life is suffocating my creativity," he declared as he packed his guitar and few belongings. He promised child support, but those checks became increasingly sporadic before stopping altogether by the time Marcus started kindergarten. I didn't pursue Richard legally, partly out of pride, partly because I didn't want Marcus to see his parents in conflict. Instead, I worked harder. By the time Marcus was 7, I had saved enough to open a small diner in our neighborhood. Eleanor's place wasn't fancy, but it quickly developed a loyal clientele who appreciated my home-style cooking and reasonable prices. I worked 16-hour days, arriving before dawn to prep and staying until midnight to close. The apartment above the diner became our home, allowing me to be present for Marcus while building the business. Those early years were exhausting but fulfilling. After dropping Marcus at school, I'd work the morning rush, then take a break to attend his soccer games or school events before returning for the dinner service. Many nights he'd fall asleep in the small office I had set up behind the kitchen, where he did homework while I managed the books. "Why do you work so hard, Mom?" he asked me once when he was about 9. "Because I want you to have choices in life, sweetheart," I replied. "Education, opportunity, security, these things open doors." By the time Marcus entered high school, Eleanor's place had expanded to 3 locations across Queens and Brooklyn. I had caught the attention of a restaurant group that wanted to franchise my concept, offering financial backing to scale further. The timing seemed perfect. Marcus had been accepted to an exclusive private school known for sending graduates to Ivy League universities, and the tuition was steep. I took the partnership deal, and over the next decade, Eleanor's homestyle diners grew to 27 locations across the Northeast. The work was even more demanding: constant travel, endless meetings, managing an expanding staff, but the financial rewards were substantial. I could now afford the best for Marcus: SAT tutors, summer programs abroad, tennis lessons at the Easy Country Club where his new friends played. Our relationship changed during those years. The close bond we'd forged in that tiny apartment above the original diner began to fray as Marcus integrated into the privileged world his new school offered. He became embarrassed by my lack of formal education, my working-class mannerisms, the fact that I still spoke with a slight Midwestern accent despite decades in New York. "Mom, do you have to wear that uniform to Parents' Day?" he asked when he was 16, eyeing my Eleanor's Diner polo shirt with distaste. "The other parents will be in business suits." I'm coming straight from the Westchester opening, I explained. There's no time to change. Then maybe skip it, he suggested casually, as if the knife he'd just plunged into my heart wasn't significant. I went anyway, sitting uncomfortably among investment bankers and corporate lawyers in my branded polo and sensible shoes, smiling through their condescending questions about my cute little restaurants. Despite the growing distance between us, I never wavered in my commitment to Marcus's future. When he was accepted to Cornell, I paid the full tuition without hesitation, even though it meant postponing the renovation of our original location. When he decided to pursue an MBA at Wharton afterward, I liquidated some of my earlier investments to cover the costs. When he fell in love with Vanessa, the daughter of a prominent surgeon, I gifted them the down payment for a brownstone in Park Slope, ensuring they could establish themselves in a neighborhood befitting Vanessa's expectations. Through it all, I kept building my business. By 2015, Eleanor's had grown to 63 locations across 12 states. We'd diversified into catering and packaged foods sold in grocery stores. My personal net worth on paper had reached 8 figures, though most of it was tied up in the business. It was around this time that my financial advisor, James Whitaker, suggested diversifying my holdings internationally. Eleanor, you've built something remarkable, he said during one of our quarterly reviews. But you're overexposed. Economic downturns hit the restaurant industry particularly hard. We should consider offshore structures to protect a portion of your wealth. Initially, I hesitated. It sounded complicated and possibly shady, but James explained the legitimate tax benefits and asset protection advantages of establishing accounts in certain jurisdictions. After careful consideration and consultation with specialized attorneys, I established a series of accounts and investment vehicles in the Cayman Islands, transferring approximately 40% of my liquid assets over time. Think of it as insurance, James advised. Something to fall back on if the unexpected happens. I never imagined how prophetic those words would prove to be. In late 2019, I was negotiating a major expansion deal that would take Eleanor's National, potentially doubling our footprint within 5 years. The future looked brighter than ever. Marcus and Vanessa had given me my first grandchild, a beautiful girl named Sophia, and although they limited my visits, were establishing a routine mom, I cherished every moment with her. Then came 2020, and with it, the pandemic. Almost overnight, our dine-in business evaporated. We pivoted to takeout and delivery, but the margins were razor thin. The catering division collapsed as events were canceled nationwide. Within months, we were hemorrhaging cash. I poured my personal savings into keeping the business afloat, convinced that if we could just hold on, we'd recover. I didn't touch the offshore funds. Those were my ultimate safety net, and accessing them would trigger tax consequences I wasn't prepared to face while simultaneously fighting to save the business. By mid-2021, it was clear that Eleanor's wouldn't survive in its current form. We closed 40 locations, but the debt accumulated during the pandemic was insurmountable. In October, I filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, hoping to reorganize and salvage something from the decades of work. The day I signed the bankruptcy papers was the darkest of my life. I sat in my attorney's office, my hand trembling as I authorized the dissolution of everything I'd built. That evening, I drove to Marcus and Vanessa's brownstone, needing the comfort of family. I've lost the business, I told them simply as we sat in their immaculate living room, little Sophia playing with blocks on an imported wool rug. Marcus and Vanessa exchanged a glance before Marcus set down his wine glass. Lost it? What exactly does that mean, Mom? Bankruptcy, I said, the word still raw in my throat. Chapter 11. We've closed most locations, and the remaining ones will likely be sold to cover debts. But you have savings, right? Vanessa asked, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her glass. All those years of profits must have built up something substantial. I shook my head slowly. I invested most of it back into expansion. What personal savings I had went toward keeping us afloat during the last year and a half. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That was foolish, Marcus said flatly. You should have cut your losses earlier. His words stung, but I pushed past them. I couldn't just give up on my employees. Some of them have been with me for decades. I took a deep breath. The thing is, I'm going to need to sell my condo. The bank is foreclosing, and I was wondering if you could stay here, Vanessa finished for me, her tone making clear what she thought of the idea. Just temporarily, I clarified. Until I figure out next steps. A month, maybe 2 at most. Another loaded glance passed between them. Something cold settled in my stomach. Mom, Marcus began in that patronizing tone he'd developed during business school. We only have 3 bedrooms. One for us, one for Sophia, and Marcus uses the third as his home office. With him working remotely 3 days a week now, that space is essential. I could sleep on the sofa, I suggested, though even as the words left my mouth, I registered the absurdity of having to beg my son for a temporary spot in his home, the very home I'd helped him buy. Vanessa laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. A sofa in the living room is hardly appropriate. What about when we entertain? What about our privacy? Besides, Marcus added, this isn't just about space. It's about boundaries. We're finally establishing ourselves as a family unit. Having you here would complicate things. Complicate things, I repeated slowly, feeling something shift inside me. You mean having your mother, who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, would complicate your perfect life? Marcus sighed as if I were being unreasonable. That's emotional manipulation, Mom. I appreciate what you did. But parents are supposed to provide for their children. That was your choice, and now we're making our choices for our family. What about Eleanor's parents? I asked, turning to Vanessa. Her parents owned a sprawling 5-bedroom house in Connecticut, primarily used as a weekend retreat. Mom and Dad have their routine, she replied stiffly. They wouldn't want a house guest disrupting things. I sat there stunned into silence. Through the shock, memories flashed unbidden. Nights spent calculating how to stretch funds to cover Marcus's school fees while still making rent. Postponing dental work because his orthodontia took priority. The vacation to Europe I'd promised myself at 50 but never took because it coincided with his wedding. I see, I said finally, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. And what exactly would you suggest I do? There are senior living communities that offer reasonable rates, Vanessa offered brightly, as if she'd just suggested a spa retreat. My friend Stephanie placed her mother in one last year. They have activities, meals included. It could be perfect for someone in your situation. Senior living? I'm 65, not 85, I replied, unable to hide my incredulity. And those places require significant deposits and monthly fees. With what money would I pay for that? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Well, you must have something left, Mom. Social Security, maybe? And I'm sure you could get a part-time job to supplement. A part-time job, I echoed. The successful entrepreneur who had once employed hundreds, now being advised to seek part-time. Work by her own son. Look, Marcus said with forced patience. This situation is unfortunate, but it's not our responsibility to fix it. We have Sophia to think about, our careers, our future. We can't derail all that because your business decisions didn't work out. In that moment, looking at my son's handsome face, the face I'd kissed goodnight thousands of times, the face I'd watched transform from innocent child to confident adult, I realized I was looking at a stranger. Somewhere along the way, the loving boy I'd raised had become this cold, calculating man who could dismiss his mother's lifetime of sacrifice with clinical detachment. I understand, I said quietly, rising to my feet. I won't impose on you. Mom. Don't be dramatic, Marcus said, irritation creeping into his voice. We're trying to have a rational discussion here. There's nothing more to discuss, I replied, gathering my purse. You've made your position very clear. Where will you go? Vanessa asked, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossing her face. Don't worry yourself about that, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice despite the earthquake happening inside me. I've survived worse than this. As I walked to the door, little Sophia toddled over, her arms reaching up to me. Gamma, up! I knelt down, drinking in her innocent face, her trusting eyes. Grandma has to go now, sweetheart. Be good for Mommy and Daddy. Will you at least stay for dinner? Marcus called after me, a belated attempt at civility. I turned back. One last time, memorizing the image of my family in their perfect home, the home that now had no place for me. No, thank you. I've lost my appetite. The door closed behind me with a soft final click. I stood on their elegant brownstone steps, watching darkness settle over Brooklyn, feeling oddly weightless. 40 years of devotion, dismissed in a 15-minute conversation. As I walked to the subway, my phone buzzed with a text from James Whitaker. Eleanor, just checking if you want to discuss liquidating any of the Cayman assets given the current situation. Current balance across accounts is 7.4 million. Call me when you can. I stopped mid-stride, a strange laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. $7.4 million, safely tucked away offshore, untouched by the bankruptcy. Unknown. To Marcus, to Vanessa, to anyone except James and my attorneys. For the first time since signing those bankruptcy papers, I smiled. That night, I checked into a modest hotel near Central Park. Nothing extravagant, old habits die hard, but clean and comfortable enough while I planned my next steps. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I finally returned James Whitaker's call. Eleanor, I've been worried about you, he said immediately. I've been following the news about the bankruptcy. It's been challenging, I admitted, the understatement almost making me laugh. How are you holding up? Are you staying with Marcus? The question sent a fresh wave of pain through me. No, that's not an option. A pause. I see, he said carefully. Then it's fortunate we set up those offshore structures when we did. At least you have resources to fall back on. Yes, I said softly, though I never imagined I'd need them quite like this. We spent the next hour discussing options. The Cayman accounts were structured as a series of trusts and investment vehicles, deliberately complicated to maximize protection. Accessing the funds would require some maneuvering, but it was all perfectly legal. I had declared these assets appropriately on my taxes through the years, paid what was legitimately owed. The structures were about asset protection, not tax evasion. How quickly can I access some of the funds? I asked. I can arrange a transfer of $250,000 to your personal account within 48 hours, James replied. That should tide you over while we develop a longer-term strategy. Perhaps purchasing a new residence outright to avoid future housing insecurity? After we hung up, I sat by the window, watching the twinkling lights of Manhattan. I had spent decades building a business empire that ultimately crumbled, but here was this second chance I'd never expected to need. The irony wasn't lost on me. The careful contingency planning that Marcus had criticized as unnecessary paranoia years ago was now my salvation. I thought about Marcus and Vanessa in their brownstone, believing I was destitute, possibly imagining me at a shelter, or begging distant acquaintances for a couch to sleep on. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a hollow ache where maternal pride had once lived. By morning, I had made my decision. I wouldn't confront Marcus with the truth about my finances, at least not yet. That revelation wouldn't change who he had revealed himself to be. Instead, I would rebuild my life on my own terms, without his knowledge. First, I needed a place to live. Not just any place, somewhere that represented this new chapter. I contacted a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties, explaining that I would be purchasing in cash and needed complete discretion. Within 3 days, I was touring a stunning waterfront condominium in Battery Park City with breathtaking views of the harbor. The price tag, $3.2 million, would have made me flinch in the past. But now I simply nodded and asked about the closing timeline. We could expedite, especially with a cash offer, the agent explained. 30 days, possibly less. Perfect, I said, and I'd like to furnish it completely before moving in. Can you recommend a designer who could handle everything turnkey? Her eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. Absolutely. I work with several excellent designers who specialize in comprehensive projects. As I signed the initial paperwork, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Just checking if you found a place to stay. Marcus is concerned. Concerned. Now he was concerned after showing me the door. I typed back a brief response. Yes, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Good to hear. By the way, some of your mail was delivered here. Looks like final notices from creditors. Should we forward them somewhere? I smiled grimly. Of course, that was their real concern, not my welfare, but ensuring my financial problems didn't somehow become theirs. You can discard them, I replied. Those matters are being handled. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life of sorts. During daytime hours, I met with my bankruptcy attorneys, negotiating with creditors and winding down what remained of Eleanor's diners. The business I had poured my heart into for 4 decades was being dismantled piece by piece, equipment auctioned, recipes and branding rights sold to the highest bidder. But evenings and weekends were devoted to my rebirth. Working with the interior designer, I created a home that reflected not who I had been, but who I was becoming. Elegant, sophisticated, uncompromising. Gone were the homey, rustic touches that had defined my previous residences. Instead, I chose sleek, contemporary furnishings, bold artwork, and a color palette of steel blues and silvers. This is quite different from what you described as your previous style, the designer remarked during one of our meetings. I'm quite different now, I replied simply. As the closing date approached, I received an unexpected call from Marcus. Mom, he began without preamble. Vanessa and I have been talking, and we're a bit concerned about your situation. Oh, I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away. Yes, we realized we might have been a bit hasty in our response. We know this must be a difficult time for you. Something had changed. His tone lacked the dismissive confidence of our last encounter. We thought perhaps we could help you look into some options, he continued. Vanessa found a nice senior apartment complex in Queens. It's subsidized, so the rent would be manageable on a limited income. We'd be willing to help with the application process. Queens. A subsidized apartment. After throwing me out of their home, they were magnanimously offering to help me apply for low-income housing. That's thoughtful, I said, careful to keep any trace of sarcasm from my voice. But I've made other arrangements. What arrangements? He asked, surprise evident in his tone. Have you found a roommate situation? Something like that, I replied. Vaguely. I'm quite comfortable. Well, that's unexpected, Marcus said. What about your finances? Those creditor notices kept coming. Are you getting proper legal advice about the bankruptcy? Everything is being handled appropriately, I assured him. You don't need to concern yourself. Mom, I'm just trying to help. You don't need to be so defensive. I closed my eyes, counting silently to 10. I appreciate the concern, Marcus. Really. But I'm managing just fine. After we hung up, I sat on the hotel bed, emotions swirling. Even now, he couldn't see me clearly, couldn't imagine that I might be capable of solving my own problems. In his mind, I was either a burden to be avoided or a charity case to be managed from a safe distance. 3 days later, I closed on the Battery Park condominium. Standing in the empty space afterward, keys in hand, watching sunlight dance across the harbor, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The woman who had scraped together every penny to give her son advantages she never had, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who would never again make herself small to accommodate others' comfort. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a social media post from Vanessa, a family photo with Marcus and Sophia at some charity gala, captioned, "So proud of my husband receiving the Young Philanthropist Award tonight. Blessed Offshore family legacy." I studied Marcus in his tuxedo, plastic smile firmly in place, the very image of success and generosity. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me, being celebrated for charity while showing none to his own mother. That was when I knew it wasn't enough to simply rebuild my life in private. There needed to be a reckoning. The furnished condominium was ready. By early December, transformed into a showcase of modern luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the winter harbor view, where ferry boats cut through the gray waters and the Statue of Liberty stood sentinel in the distance. I walked through each room slowly, taking in the transformation. The designer had executed my vision perfectly, a sophisticated urban oasis that bore no resemblance to the homey, practical spaces I'd inhabited throughout my life. This place made a statement about wealth and taste that my previous homes never had. "What do you think?" asked Mira, the designer, watching me anxiously. "It's perfect," I said, running my hand along the sleek kitchen island of Italian marble. "Exactly what I wanted." "I've never completed a project this quickly before," she admitted. "But your decisiveness made it possible. Most clients agonize over every detail." I smiled. "When you've lost everything once, you gain clarity about what matters." After she left, I stood alone in my new living room, watching the early winter sunset paint the sky in bruised purples and golds. The silence felt profound after decades of restaurant chaos. No sizzling grills, no clattering dishes, no customers calling my name. My phone buzzed with a text from James Whitaker. "Everything transferred as requested. The remaining funds are now diversified across the new investment portfolio we discussed. Quarterly reports will begin after the new year." I had restructured my finances completely. With James's guidance, I'd established a new foundation for myself, one designed for security, growth, and, most importantly, complete independence. 3.2 million for the condo, another 400,000 for furnishings and art, $1 million in easily accessible investments, and the rest strategically positioned for long-term growth. I was secure. More than secure. I was wealthy. Not in the paper value way I'd been as a business owner, but in a tangible, protected way that couldn't be erased by market downturns or pandemics. And still, no one knew. Not Marcus, not Vanessa, not any of my former business associates who now treated me with that particular awkward pity reserved for the formerly successful. The question that had been forming in my mind since that night, at Marcus's home, was now crystallized. How would I use this hidden power? What form would the reckoning take? I wasn't interested in simple revenge. Showing up at Marcus's door in designer clothes to flaunt my wealth seemed petty and ultimately pointless. It wouldn't undo his betrayal or change who he had revealed himself to be. No, this needed to be more meaningful, something that would force Marcus to truly see himself, and me, clearly. As Christmas approached, the texts and calls from Marcus increased in frequency but remained superficial. "Just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Sophia keeps asking about you." He never suggested a visit, never offered concrete help, never acknowledged the callousness of his earlier behavior. Vanessa sent a holiday card, a professional photo of their perfect family in coordinated outfits. Sophia perched on Marcus's lap, with a pre-printed message and only her signature. No personal note, no invitation for Christmas dinner. just a performative gesture of inclusion that required minimal effort. I sent Sophia a carefully selected gift, a handcrafted dollhouse that had caught my eye in a boutique children's store, but nothing for Marcus and Vanessa. The package included a card with my new address, without explanation or invitation. 3 days after Christmas, my intercom buzzed unexpectedly. When the doorman announced Mr. Marcus Turner, my heart jumped despite myself. "Send him up," I said, quickly glancing around my immaculate living room, suddenly seeing it through his eyes. The obvious luxury, the harbor view, the original artwork on the walls. When the elevator doors opened directly into my foyer, a private elevator being one of the building's premium features, Marcus's expression was exactly what I'd anticipated. Shock giving way to confusion, then suspicion. "Mom?" he said hesitantly, as if uncertain he had the right apartment despite having been announced. What is this place?" "My new home," I replied calmly. "Would you like a tour?" He stepped inside slowly, his eyes darting from the marble floors to the designer furniture to the dramatic chandelier suspended over the dining area. "I don't understand. How are you? When did you—" "Coffee?" I offered, moving toward the kitchen. "Or perhaps something stronger? I have an excellent scotch." He followed me, bewilderment etched across his features. "Mom? What's going on? Whose place is this, really?" "Mine," I said simply, measuring coffee beans into the grinder. "Purchased outright last month." "That's not possible," he said flatly. "You're bankrupt. The business failed. Where would you get money for—" He gestured around. "All this?" I turned to face him directly. "Not all my assets were tied to the business, Marcus." "What assets? What are you talking about?" The genuine confusion in his voice might have been comical under different circumstances. The son who had dismissed me as a financial burden, who couldn't imagine me as anything but desperate and dependent, now confronted with irrefutable evidence to the contrary. "Please, sit down," I said, indicating the bar stools at the kitchen island. "This might take some explaining." Reluctantly, he perched on a stool, his body language tense, defensive. I placed a coffee cup before him and leaned against the counter. 15 years ago, I began. My financial advisor suggested I diversify my holdings internationally as protection against potential economic downturns affecting the restaurant industry. I established accounts in the Cayman Islands, transferring a significant portion of my personal wealth there over time. Marcus's eyes widened. "Offshore accounts? That sounds— Is that even legal?" "Completely legal," I assured him. "Every dollar was properly reported to the IRS. It's about asset protection, not tax evasion." "But then, during the bankruptcy, those funds were separate from the business," I explained, "protected from creditors, untouched by the company's failure." He set down his coffee cup with a sharp click against the saucer. "So all this time, while I've been worried sick about you living in some horrible situation, you've been— what? Secretly wealthy? Moving into luxury condos?" The audacity of his indignation was breathtaking. "Worried sick?" I repeated. "Is that what you call throwing your mother out when she came to you for help? Suggesting she apply for subsidized senior housing as if she were a charity case?" Color rose in his cheeks. "We were trying to help within our means. We have Sophia to think about. Our future." "No," I cut him off. "You were protecting your comfort at my expense. Don't rewrite history, Marcus. Not with me." For a moment, he looked like the little boy who'd been caught in a lie. Defensive, embarrassed, searching for justification. Then his expression hardened. "So, this is what? Some kind of gotcha moment? You let me believe you were destitute just— to what? Teach me a lesson?" "I didn't let you believe anything," I corrected. "You assumed. You never asked about my financial situation in detail. Never offered real help. Never invited me to stay while I sorted things out. You simply decided I was a burden and acted accordingly. He stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. We were concerned about you. So concerned that not once in the past 2 months have you invited me to see my granddaughter, I said quietly. So concerned that you sent a generic Christmas card without even a personal note. We've been busy, he said defensively. The holidays are hectic with a toddler. I nodded slowly. Yes, I imagine they are. Too busy for the woman who sacrificed everything to give you the life you now enjoy. Too busy for the mother who worked 16-hour days so you could attend private school and make connections with the right people. That's emotional manipulation, he snapped, retreating to his familiar accusation. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. That doesn't create a lifelong debt. I studied him. This stranger wearing my son's face, speaking words. That would have been unimaginable from the sweet boy I'd raised. When had this transformation happened? Had it been gradual? Or was there a defining moment when the loving child became this entitled adult? You're right, I said finally. It doesn't create a debt. It should create something far more valuable. Gratitude, compassion, a desire to honor that sacrifice by extending the same generosity to others. I paused. Including your own mother when she needs it. Marcus paced the living room, his reflection, fragmented across the wall of windows. So what now? You've made your point. You tricked me into revealing what exactly? That I didn't offer you enough help? That I'm not the perfect son? Fine, I admit it. This isn't about being perfect, I said, keeping my voice level. It's about basic human decency. And I didn't trick you into anything. Your actions were entirely your own choice. He stopped pacing, turning to face me. What do you want from me, Mom? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry we didn't invite you to live with us. I'm sorry we suggested alternatives that weren't up to your apparently very expensive standards. The practiced insincerity in his voice was painful to hear. This performative remorse wasn't acknowledgement. It was another evasion. What I want, I said carefully, is for you to understand what happened between us, not just apologize to make an uncomfortable conversation end faster. Understand what? His frustration was building. That you're secretly rich and let me believe otherwise? That you've been playing some kind of game? No game, Marcus. When I came to you after losing the business, I was genuinely devastated. Everything I'd built over 40 years was gone. I wasn't thinking about offshore accounts or financial strategies. I was in shock, grieving, and I turned to the one person I thought I could count on, my son. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, and I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. I've admitted that. It's not just about support, I persisted. It's about how quickly you categorized me as a burden rather than as family. How easily you dismissed decades of sacrifice as somehow irrelevant to our current relationship. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. What do you want me to say? That I should have handled it differently? Obviously. But you're not exactly innocent here either. You let me believe you were in dire straits all this time. I never lied to you, I stated firmly. I told you I had made arrangements. You assumed those arrangements were inadequate because you couldn't imagine me having resources you didn't know about. Because normal people don't hide millions in offshore accounts. Normal people also don't throw their mothers out when they're facing financial ruin, I countered. Perhaps we're both outside the norm. A tense silence stretched between us. Outside, the winter sky was darkening, lights beginning to twinkle across the harbor. I walked to the window, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves. Why did you come here today, Marcus? I asked finally. You had my address for over a week. What prompted this visit? He hesitated, and I could see him debating whether to answer honestly or offer another polished evasion. Sophia, he said finally. She keeps asking about you. Once, To know when Grandma is coming to visit. A pang shot through my heart. My innocent granddaughter, caught between adult failures. And what do you tell her? That you're busy, that you moved to a new place. He looked away. She doesn't understand why you don't come see her anymore. And do you understand? I asked softly. He didn't answer directly. Vanessa thinks we should arrange a visit at a neutral location, like the park or the children's museum. A neutral location, as if I were some potentially dangerous element requiring careful management. I see, I said, not bothering to hide the hurt in my voice. And what do you think? Marcus sighed heavily. I think this has gotten complicated. I think, yes? I think Vanessa was the one who really didn't want you staying with us, he admitted reluctantly. She was worried about appearances, about what her parents would say if they knew my mother was living with us after a business failure. There it was. The truth beneath the excuses about space constraints and office needs, social appearances, status anxiety, the fear of being associated with failure in their carefully curated world. That doesn't excuse my behavior, he added, quickly. I should have stood up to her, should have insisted. But you didn't want to rock the boat, I finished for him. It was easier to disappoint me than to confront her. He didn't deny it, which was perhaps the most honest he'd been throughout our conversation. I moved back to the kitchen, needing distance, needing to occupy my hands. I began preparing a fresh pot of coffee, the familiar ritual calming my nerves. You? No, I said as I measured the beans. When you were 7, you had that terrible case of pneumonia. Remember? You were hospitalized for almost 2 weeks. He nodded, confused by the apparent change of subject. I slept in a chair beside your bed every night, I continued. The nurses offered to bring in a cot, but I was afraid to sleep too deeply, in case you needed me. During the day, I'd run to the restaurant for a few hours, then back to the hospital. For 14 days. I remember, he said quietly. You read me The Hobbit every night. Yes. And do you know what else was happening during those 2 weeks? The bank was threatening to foreclose on the original diner. Our refrigeration system had failed, spoiling thousands of dollars of inventory. 2 servers had quit without notice. I looked up at him. But none of that mattered because you were sick. You needed me. Mom. That's what family means, Marcus. Not convenience. Not only showing up when it's easy or when it fits your image. It means being there when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when it might even cost you something. He sat heavily on the bar stool, looking suddenly older, wearier. I know I failed that test. Yes, I agreed, not softening the truth. You did. Another silence fell between us, less tense than before, but heavy with acknowledgement. So where do we go from here? He asked finally. Are we? It depends, I said, setting a fresh cup of coffee before him. On whether you're genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship or just managing the optics now that you know I'm not destitute. His head jerked up, eyes flashing with hurt. That's not fair, isn't it? 2 hours ago, you thought I was struggling financially, and you made no real effort to see me, to include me in your life, to ensure I was okay. Now that you know I'm living in a multi-million-dollar condominium, suddenly you're here, talking about arranging visits with Sophia. It's not like that, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Then tell me what it is like, I challenged. Help me understand what changed between then and now. He stared into his coffee cup as if it might contain the answer. I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe seeing all this made me realize how badly I misjudged everything. Not just your financial situation, but who you are. What you're capable of. It was a start, a small acknowledgement that his perception had been flawed, but still focused on my newfound wealth rather than his own behavior. Marcus, I said gently, the money doesn't change who I am. I'm the same woman who came to your door 2 months ago, just with different circumstances. The question is whether you would have treated that woman, the one without visible wealth, with basic dignity and compassion. He flinched at the directness of the question. I want to say yes, but my actions speak for themselves, don't they? It was the first genuinely reflective thing he'd said all afternoon. For a moment, I glimpsed the son I remembered, the one capable of self-awareness, of growth. They do, I agreed. But actions can change. People can change, if they truly want to. The question hung unspoken between us. Did he want to? Was he capable of seeing beyond his own carefully constructed world to recognize the moral failure at the heart of his choices? I want Sophia to know her grandmother, he said after a long pause. Not just occasional visits in neutral locations, real relationship. And Vanessa? He sighed. She'll adjust, especially once she sees. He gestured around the apartment, then caught himself. That came out wrong. I didn't mean because of your money. Didn't you? I asked quietly. His silence was answer enough. January. Arrived with bitter cold and early sunsets. I settled into my new life with a strange mix of grief and liberation. The woman who had spent decades rising before dawn to prep kitchen stations, who measured success in covers served and repeat customers, was gone. In her place was someone with time. Time to read books that had gathered dust on shelves. Time to watch the harbor through changing light. Time to consider what came next. I began volunteering at a community kitchen in Queens, not far from where my first diner had stood. Twice weekly, I worked alongside others preparing meals for those experiencing food insecurity. The irony wasn't lost on me. After losing my restaurant empire, I was back in a kitchen, still feeding people, but without profit margins or expansion plans to worry about. You've got professional experience, noted Carmen, the kitchen coordinator, after watching me efficiently break down a case of vegetables. Restaurant industry? Something like that, I replied with a small smile. There was freedom in anonymity, in being judged solely on my willingness to work hard and share skills. No one at the community kitchen knew about Eleanor's diners, or offshore accounts, or family drama. I was simply Eleanor, the reliable Tuesday-Thursday volunteer who made excellent soup and never complained about cleanup duty. 3 weeks after Marcus's unexpected visit, my phone rang with Vanessa's number. This was unprecedented. She typically communicated through Marcus or not at all. Eleanor, she began without preamble, we'd like to invite you to dinner this Friday, at our home. Would that work for your schedule? The formal phrasing and slight tension in her voice told me everything I needed to know. Marcus had informed her about my financial situation, and she was recalibrating accordingly. Let me check, I said, though my calendar was embarrassingly empty. Yes, Friday would work. What time? 6:30? Sophia will still be up, but not too tired. I'll be there. Should I bring anything? A slight hesitation. Just yourself. After we hung up, I sat motionless, processing what had just occurred. The same woman who had suggested I apply for subsidized senior housing was now extending dinner invitations. The cynical part of me wanted to decline out of principle, to deny her the satisfaction of social rehabilitation through association with me now that I was deemed worthy of inclusion. But Sophia was there. My granddaughter, innocent of adult calculations, who simply missed her grandmother. So Friday found me at their brownstone door, a carefully selected bottle of wine in one hand and a package for Sophia in the other. Vanessa answered, wearing an outfit that struck me as slightly overdressed for a family dinner at home, designer jeans, silk blouse, statement necklace. Her smile was wider than I'd ever seen directed at me. Eleanor, so wonderful to see you. Please come in. The house looked different somehow. Freshly flowers in vases, new art on the walls. a subtle scent of something expensive burning in a candle. They'd redecorated, I realized, or perhaps just elevated their usual presentation for my benefit. Gamma. Sophia came running from the living room, launching herself into my arms with the uncomplicated joy only toddlers possess. I hugged her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body against mine. "I missed you, little one," I whispered. Marcus appeared in the doorway between the living room and foyer, watching our reunion with an unreadable expression. "Mom," he said finally, stepping forward to accept the wine. "Glad you could make it." The evening progressed with an elaborate choreography of politeness. Vanessa served an ambitious meal she had clearly put significant effort into preparing. The conversation remained carefully in safe territory: Sophia's preschool achievements, the unusually cold winter, an upcoming renovation to the park nearby. It was pleasant, superficially, but beneath the civility lay currents of unspoken tension. The elephant in the room, why this dinner was happening now, after months of exclusion, went studiously unaddressed. After Sophia was put to bed, with extended goodnight kisses from her grandmother, the three adults settled in the living room. With after-dinner drinks, that's when Vanessa finally broached the subject. "Marcus told me about your financial situation," she said, her manicured nails tapping lightly against her wine glass. "I have to say, I was quite surprised." "Were you?" I asked mildly. She nodded, not registering or choosing to ignore my dry tone. "The offshore accounts, the new condominium, it's all very impressive. You must have had excellent financial advisors." "I did," I acknowledged, though the decision to diversify was ultimately mine. "Smart," she said with newfound admiration. "Very smart. So many entrepreneurs fail to separate personal assets from their businesses." It was surreal, this sudden respect from a woman who had suggested I'd be appropriately housed in subsidized senior apartments only weeks earlier. The transparency of her changed attitude would have been comical if it weren't so depressing. "We've been talking," Marcus interjected, gesturing between himself and Vanessa, "and we feel terrible about how everything unfolded after your business situation changed." Vanessa nodded vigorously. "Terrible. We should have been more supportive." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have." A flicker of discomfort crossed Vanessa's perfectly made-up face. "Well, we'd like to make it up to you. We thought perhaps you might join us for our ski trip to Aspen next month. Marcus's parents have a chalet there. Well, you know that, of course. And there's plenty of room. Sophia would love having her grandmother there." My first instinct was to decline immediately. The invitation wasn't about reconciliation. It was about gaining access to what they now perceived as my social and financial capital. But underneath my cynicism, there was Sophia to consider. "That's a generous offer," I said carefully. "Let me think about it and get back to you." After dinner, as I prepared to leave, Vanessa pressed a small gift bag into my hands. "Just a little something," she said with that too bright smile. "To welcome you to your new home." In the car service on the way back to Battery Park, I opened the bag to find an expensive scented candle from a boutique home goods store. Exactly the sort of impersonal but appropriately costly gift one might give to a business associate or distant relative. I placed it on the seat beside me, a tangible representation of the transactional relationship Vanessa was proposing. Access to my granddaughter in exchange for performing the role of wealthy grandmother, who might provide advantages through association or future inheritance. The following morning, I called James Whitaker. "I need to make some changes to my estate planning," I told him. "Of course," he replied. "What are you thinking?" "I'd like to establish a trust for my granddaughter Sophia, structured to provide for her education and perhaps a modest nest egg when she reaches adulthood, but with very specific conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "The funds should be administered by a neutral third party, not her parents. and I want the existence of this trust to remain confidential during my lifetime." James was quiet for a moment. "May I ask why the confidentiality? Typically, grandparents want families to know about such provisions." "Typically, grandparents haven't been disowned until their financial status became appealing," I replied dryly. "Ah," he said, understanding. Immediately. "I see the dynamics at play. Yes, we can absolutely structure it that way." After finalizing the details for Sophia's trust, I made another decision. With James's guidance, I established the Eleanor Turner Foundation with an initial endowment of $2 million. Its mission: supporting women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, with a special focus on single mothers seeking to establish food service businesses. "This is a wonderful initiative," James commented as we reviewed the foundation documents. "A way to create meaningful legacy." Legacy. The word resonated. What would mine be? Not the failed restaurant chain that had once seemed the culmination of my life's work. Not even the material wealth I'd managed to protect. Perhaps instead, it would be the lives touched by this foundation. Women who, like me decades ago, were fighting against long odds to build something lasting. The foundation gave me purpose beyond my personal situation. I assembled a board of directors, experienced businesswomen I respected, along with community advocates familiar with the challenges facing our target demographic. We developed application processes, mentorship programs, and grant structures. Through this work, I found myself reconnected to the passion that had driven me throughout my career, not just feeding people, but creating opportunities, building something larger than myself. One afternoon in late February, as I was reviewing applications, for our first round of grants, my phone rang with Marcus's number. "Mom," he began, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. "Did you receive the Aspen invitation? We haven't heard back." "I've been meaning to call," I said. "I've decided to decline this time. I've taken on some new commitments that require my attention here in the city." "Oh." His disappointment seemed genuine. "What kind of commitments?" "I've started a foundation," I explained, hearing the pride in my own voice. "Supporting women entrepreneurs in the food industry." "A foundation? That's significant. Why didn't you mention this before?" The answer was obvious, of course. Because until recently, we barely spoke. Because our relationship had been reduced to perfunctory text messages and performative dinner invitations. "It's still in its early stages," I said instead. "But it's important work." After declining the Aspen invitation, I expected communications from Marcus and Vanessa to cool. Instead, they intensified. Text messages asking about my week, photos of Sophia sent unprompted casual mentions of social events they were attending with Vanessa's well-connected family. "Mom," Marcus texted one evening, "Vanessa's father is being honored at the Metropolitan Business Council Gala next month. They've reserved a table for family. Would you like to join us?" The invitation was transparent in its intent. Harrison Green, Vanessa's father, was a power broker in New York business circles. The gala would be attended by precisely the kind of people Marcus and Vanessa desired to impress. My presence, now that I was known to be wealthy, would be an asset to their social positioning. I declined politely, citing foundation commitments. The next day, Vanessa herself called. "Eleanor, are you sure you can't make the gala? It would mean so much to the family. And you'd meet so many interesting people, potential donors for your foundation, perhaps." Her transparent attempt to frame attendance as beneficial to me rather than them was almost impressive in its calculation. "Thank you, Vanessa. But I'll have to pass this time." "Well," she said, unable to hide her disappointment, "we should get together soon anyway. Perhaps brunch this weekend? We could come to your neighborhood." This pattern continued through March. Invitations to increasingly prestigious events, spontaneous suggestions of family activities, casual references to influential people they knew who, Would love to meet you, Mom. Each overture carefully calibrated to appear as simple family inclusion while actually serving their social climbing agenda. I accepted some invitations, those that involved meaningful time with Sophia, and declined others. Throughout, I maintained a pleasant but reserved demeanor, never confronting them directly about the obvious motivation behind their newfound desire for my company. Meanwhile, the Eleanor Turner Foundation awarded its first round of grants. We held a small ceremony at a community center in Queens, where 5 women received checks and mentorship packages. Each had a compelling story: a Venezuelan immigrant creating authentic arepas from her grandmother's recipe, a former foster youth building a catering business specializing in comfort food, a domestic violence survivor opening a bakery to employ other women in transition. Local media covered the event. It wasn't front-page news, but several neighborhood papers and a small business blog ran features. I gave a brief speech about resilience and second chances, careful to keep the focus on the grant recipients rather than myself. The morning after the ceremony, my phone rang with Marcus's number. "Mom," he began without preamble, "why didn't you tell me about the foundation ceremony? We would have come to support you." "It wasn't about me," I replied. "It was about the women receiving the grants. Still, we're family. We should be there for these important moments." His tone carried a hint of hurt that seemed genuine. "Next time, perhaps," I offered neutrally. He cleared his throat. "Actually, I'm calling about something else too. I saw an interesting property listing yesterday. Brownstone just 3 blocks from us. Completely renovated, gorgeous garden space. It made me think of you." I frowned, confused by this apparent non sequitur. "I'm very happy with my current home, Marcus." Of course, of course. I just thought, well, if you were closer, you could see Sophia more easily. Maybe even help with childcare sometimes. Vanessa and I have been discussing having another baby, and having family nearby would be so valuable." And there it was. The real purpose emerging. Not just social access, but practical benefits. Free childcare from grandma, conveniently relocated, to suit their needs. "That's thoughtful," I said carefully, "but I'm settled where I am. Battery Park suits me." "But it's so far from family," he persisted. "And honestly, Mom, at your age, don't you want people nearby? People who can check on you, help if needed, at my age?" The subtle implication that I was entering a phase of inevitable decline requiring their oversight was not lost on me. "I have people," I said simply. "Friends, colleagues from the foundation, neighbors in my building. I'm not isolated, Marcus." "That's not the same as family," he countered. "Isn't it?" I asked softly. "Where was family when I lost my business? When I needed a place to stay temporarily?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed. "I deserve that. But Mom, we're trying to make things right now. We want you in our lives." "On your terms," I clarified. "In ways that benefit you. Socially, practically, perhaps eventually, financially." "That's not fair," he protested, but without much conviction. "Let me ask you something, Marcus. If I were to tell you right now that I'd lost everything, that the offshore accounts were frozen, the condo foreclosed upon, would you still be encouraging me to move closer? Would you be inviting me to galas and suggesting I help with childcare?" "That's a hypothetical designed to make me look bad no matter how I answer," he said defensively. "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps it's a question worth honest reflection." After we hung up, I sat in my living room watching boats cross the harbor, thinking about the conversation. Marcus and Vanessa's behavior followed a predictable pattern. They were treating me differently based solely on their perception of my financial status and potential usefulness to their aspirations. But was I any better? Was I not using my hidden wealth as a test they were designed to fail? Was this indirect approach, letting them reveal their true selves without confronting them directly, truly the path to resolution? That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorman called up to announce Ms. Vanessa Turner, and against my better judgment, I told him to send her up. She emerged from the elevator looking uncharacteristically disheveled, hair pulled back hastily, minimal makeup, casual clothes instead of her usual carefully curated outfits. "Eleanor," she began without preamble, "we need to talk." I gestured her inside. "Would you like some tea?" "No." She remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "Marcus told me about your conversation, about your test." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what he called it?" "He said you asked if we'd still want you around if you lost all your money again." Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "That's not fair. You're manipulating the situation." "By asking a hypothetical question?" "By holding our past mistake against us indefinitely," she exclaimed. "Yes, we handled things badly when you came to us after the bankruptcy. We were wrong. Marcus has acknowledged that. I'm acknowledging it now. But you're punishing us by constantly implying our current efforts to include you are solely about your money." I considered her words carefully. "And are they not? Be honest, Vanessa. If I were still the financially ruined restaurant owner you believed me to be 2 months ago, would you be standing in my living room right now?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, conflict visible on her face. Finally, she sank onto my sofa, the fight seeming to drain from her. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. And that's the truth. I honestly don't know. Her unexpected candor surprised me. I sat across from her, studying this woman who had become family through marriage, but remained essentially a stranger. "When I first met Marcus," she continued, "he told me how amazing you were, how you'd built a business from nothing, how you'd sacrificed everything for his education and opportunities. I was impressed, but I was also intimidated." "Intimidated? By me?" This was not what I'd expected to hear. She nodded. "My family has always had money. My accomplishments came with safety nets. But you were self-made, resilient. The kind of woman I wasn't sure I could ever be." She looked down at her hands. "When your business failed, it was almost a relief. Suddenly you weren't this intimidating success story anymore. You were vulnerable, needing help. And instead of rising to that occasion, I saw it as confirmation." "Confirmation of what?" "That you weren't really extraordinary after all. That anyone could fail. That my privileged path wasn't lesser than your self-made one." She looked up. Her expression pained. "It's horrible to admit this, but there was a part of me that felt vindicated by your business collapse." The brutal honesty of this confession left me momentarily speechless. It was an ugly truth, but a human one. The complicated, sometimes petty emotions that shape our reactions to others' misfortunes. "When we learned about your offshore accounts, your new condo," she continued, "that vindication disappeared. You were extraordinary again, not just in business, but in foresight, in self-protection. And yes, that changed how I saw you. It's not just about the money itself. It's about what it represents. Resilience, intelligence, power." "Power," I repeated, testing the word. "Is that what you think I have now?" Vanessa looked up, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our relationship. "Isn't it? You lost everything professionally, yet still maintained control over your life. You have financial independence, a beautiful home, meaningful, work through your foundation. And yes, you have the ability to include or exclude us from your life on your terms, not ours." She paused. "That's power." Her assessment wasn't wrong, though her framing revealed much about her worldview. For Vanessa, relationships were hierarchical. Someone always had the upper hand, the greater leverage. In her mind, my newfound wealth had simply reversed our positions in this invisible power structure. I never wanted power over my family, I said quietly. I wanted connection, reciprocity, the knowledge that we would support each other through difficulties, not just when it was convenient or advantageous. Isn't that idealistic? Vanessa asked, though without her usual dismissive tone. Real families are messier than that. People disappoint each other. They fail to live up to expectations. Yes, I acknowledged. People fail. But there's a difference between human imperfection and calculated self-interest. When you and Marcus turned me away, it wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a deliberate choice that reflected your values. She flinched slightly, but didn't argue the point. So, where does that leave us? Are you planning to keep Sophia in your life but hold Marcus and me at a distance indefinitely? Is that your revenge? This isn't about revenge, I said firmly. It's about establishing boundaries based on what I've learned about our relationship, and it's about being honest about what's really happening between us. And what is happening? She asked. You and Marcus are approaching me differently now that you perceive me as wealthy and potentially useful to your social aspirations. I'm responding with caution because I don't trust that this change is genuine or sustainable. Vanessa was quiet, for a long moment, seemingly absorbing my words. That's fair, she admitted finally. More fair than I probably deserve. She looked around my elegant living room, her gaze settling on the harbor view. You know, I grew up with all this. The luxury, the views, the prestigious addresses. It never seemed special to me, just normal. Expected. I waited, sensing she was building toward something. The thing I admired about you, she continued, even when I was being terrible to you, was that you built your success from nothing. No family connections, no inheritance, no elite education. Just hard work and determination. She met my eyes again. I've never built anything. I've only maintained what was given to me. This vulnerability from Vanessa, this admission of her own insecurities, caught me off guard. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it offered a glimpse into the person beneath the polished, privileged exterior. It's not too late, I found myself saying, to build something of your own. She gave a small, sad smile. What would I even build? My art history degree and part-time gallery work hardly prepare me for entrepreneurship. That's not true, I countered. You have organizational skills, social connections, aesthetic judgment. Those are valuable in many contexts. She looked surprised at my assessment. You've noticed those things about me? Of course. I've always paid attention to my family, Vanessa, even when you were pushing me away. Something shifted in her expression, softening, perhaps even the beginning of genuine remorse. I've been awful to you, she said simply. Not just after the bankruptcy, but for years. Making Marcus choose between us, making you feel unwelcome in your own family. Yes, I agreed. You have. I don't know if that can be fixed, she continued. But I want you to know I see it now, and I'm sorry. Not because you turned out to be rich after all, but because it was wrong. Period. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from either of them, acknowledgement without excuses or self-justification. It didn't erase the past, but it opened a door that had seemed firmly closed. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. Vanessa stood, smoothing her casual clothes with an automatic gesture that betrayed her self-consciousness. I should go. Marcus doesn't even know I came here, but I wanted to, I don't know, start something different between us, maybe. As she moved toward the elevator, I made a spontaneous decision. Vanessa, the foundation I started, we're looking for someone to help curate an exhibition of work by women artists from underrepresented communities. It would be part-time, using those art history skills of yours, if you're interested. She turned back, genuine surprise on her face. You'd consider me? After everything? It's not a personal favor, I clarified. It's a professional opportunity that matches your qualifications. The board would make the final decision, not me. I'd like that, she said quietly. I'd like that very much. After she left, I stood by the windows watching night settle over the harbor, processing our unexpected conversation. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, more like the first tentative step toward something new, something based on honesty rather than performance and obligation. The following Sunday, I invited Marcus, Vanessa, and Sophia for brunch at my condominium. It was the first time I had initiated a family gathering since before the bankruptcy. When they arrived, Sophia ran to me for hugs as always. But something was different about Marcus and Vanessa. A certain guardedness had fallen away, replaced by what appeared to be genuine interest in connecting. Over breakfast, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. We discussed the foundation, Sophia's preschool adventures, a documentary series Marcus had been watching. No mention of galas or influential people or real estate near their home. As Sophia napped in my guest room afterward, the three adults sat in the living room with coffee. Mom, Marcus began hesitantly, I've been thinking a lot about what you asked, whether we'd want you in our lives if you weren't financially secure. I nodded, waiting. The honest answer is, I don't know, and that shames me deeply. He set his cup down, hands slightly unsteady. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring relationships by what they offered me practically, socially, financially. Not just with you, with everyone. When did that start? I asked gently. He considered the question. Probably in college. Maybe earlier. I saw how Vanessa's family operated. These strategic social connections, the careful cultivation of useful relationships. It seemed sophisticated, adult, more pragmatic than the unconditional family bonds you taught me to value. And now? Now I see what I've lost in that approach. The authenticity, the real connection. He glanced at Vanessa, who nodded encouragingly. We've been talking a lot, reevaluating our priorities. We don't want Sophia to grow up learning that. Relationships are transactional. We don't want to be the kind of parents whose love seems conditional on success or status. It was a small revelation, but a meaningful one. The acknowledgement that they had been living by values they wouldn't want to pass to their daughter. I can't promise immediate transformation, he continued. These patterns are deeply ingrained now. But I want to try to be the son you deserve. The son you raised me to be, before I lost my way. That's all any of us can do, I said. Try to align our actions with our better values. Recognize when we've strayed and make corrections. Later, as they prepared to leave, Marcus hung back while Vanessa gathered Sophia's things. There's something else I want you to know, he said quietly. I've started therapy to understand why I was able to treat you so callously, to work on becoming someone who wouldn't do that again, to you or anyone else. The humility in this admission moved me unexpectedly. It was one thing to apologize, another entirely to commit to the difficult work of genuine change. I'm proud of you for that, I told him, meaning it. Really? Uncertainty flickered across his face. You're not disappointed that I need help? Quite the opposite, I assured him. Recognizing when you need help and seeking it out, that takes courage and wisdom. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, processing the subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamic. It wasn't a Hollywood ending, no tearful embrace, no dramatic declarations, just small steps toward authentic connection, fragile, beginnings of rebuilding trust. The next morning, I called James Whitaker. I'd like to make some additional adjustments to my estate planning, I explained. Of course, he replied. What did you have in mind? The trust for Sophia should remain as structured, but I'd like to add provisions for any future grandchildren. And I'd like to create something for Marcus and Vanessa as well. Not a direct inheritance, but perhaps a foundation they would administer after my passing. something that would require them to continue the work of supporting women entrepreneurs. Not a blank check, but a meaningful responsibility, James observed. Exactly. Something that honors the values I hope they're rediscovering, rather than simply transferring wealth. As spring bloomed across the city, our family continued this careful reconstruction. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns resurfaced, when trust wavered, when hurt feelings threatened progress. But there were also breakthroughs, genuine conversations, shared experiences, small kindnesses offered without calculation. Vanessa did apply for the foundation position and was hired on her own merits. The part-time work seemed to awaken something in her, a sense of purpose beyond social positioning, a confidence based on contribution rather than consumption. Marcus began accompanying me to community kitchen volunteer shifts occasionally, reconnecting with the values I'd tried to instill during those early years above the original diner. Watching him chop vegetables alongside people from all walks of life, seeing him listen to their stories with genuine interest, I glimpsed the son I remembered, before privilege and status anxiety had reshuffled his priorities. As summer approached, the foundation's work expanded. We awarded a second round of grants, partnered with a culinary school to provide technical training for our entrepreneurs, and launched a mentorship program pairing established restaurant owners with women just starting out. My days filled with meaningful work, my calendar with meetings and events focused on creating opportunity rather than accumulating wealth. Through it all, my relationship with Marcus, Vanessa, and Sophia continued its gradual healing. We established new rituals, Sunday brunches at my condominium, weekly video calls with Sophia on evenings when I couldn't visit in person, occasional family outings to museums or parks. These gatherings were markedly different from the performative social occasions of earlier months. Simpler, more authentic, focused on connection rather than impression management. One Wednesday evening in June, I invited Marcus to meet me for coffee after work. He arrived at the small cafe near my building looking curious but relaxed, the defensive posture he'd carried for so long notably absent. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked as we settled at an outdoor table overlooking the harbor. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "I just wanted to talk to you about something important." He nodded, waiting patiently. Another change from the Marcus who would have immediately jumped to conclusions or attempted to control the conversation. "I've been thinking about the future," I began. "Specifically, about my estate planning." His expression immediately closed. "Mom, we don't need to discuss this. Whatever you decide about your money is your business." "I appreciate that response," I said sincerely. "But this isn't about money exactly. It's about legacy." I explained the adjustments I'd made, the trust for Sophia and future grandchildren, the foundation Marcus and Vanessa would eventually oversee. "I'm not telling you this to hold it over you or to secure your attention," I clarified. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand my values, what I hope to continue even after I'm gone." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the boats drifting across the harbor. "You know," he said finally, "6 months ago, this kind of conversation would have sent me into calculation mode, mentally adjusting my long-term financial plans, thinking about what advantages might come my way. That's embarrassing to admit, but it's true." "And now?" I prompted. "Now I'm thinking about responsibility, about continuing something meaningful you've built." He met my eyes. "That's a different kind of inheritance, isn't it? Not just receiving wealth, but carrying forward purpose." It was exactly what I'd hoped he would understand. Not that he would receive assets someday, but that he would inherit the opportunity to continue meaningful work, to extend values beyond my lifetime. "There's something else," I said. "Something I haven't told anyone yet." His expression turned concerned. "You're not ill, are you?" "No, nothing like that," I assured him. "I've been approached about writing a book. My story, from the first diner to the bankruptcy to the foundation. The publisher believes it could inspire other women entrepreneurs, especially those facing setbacks. That's amazing, Mom. You should definitely do it. I'm considering it, but it would mean being public about everything, including the offshore accounts, the family estrangement, all of it. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Including how I treated you. I nodded. I wouldn't. Use real names for you and Vanessa, of course. But yes, that part of the story would be included. It's central to the journey. He considered this, fingers tapping thoughtfully against his coffee cup. You should tell it truthfully, he said finally. Don't protect me by softening what happened. If the story can help others, it deserves to be told honestly. This simple statement, this willingness to accept uncomfortable truth rather than demanding a sanitized narrative, showed me how far he had come. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. As we walked back toward my building afterward, Marcus asked a question that surprised me. Mom, were you ever tempted to just cut ties with us completely? After how we treated you? I considered my answer carefully. There were moments, I admitted. Especially in those first few weeks after you turned me away. The hurt was so raw then, so all-encompassing. What stopped you? Sophia, initially. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my relationship with her. I paused. But beyond that, I suppose I still saw glimpses of the boy I raised, somewhere underneath the man you'd become. I wanted to believe that person still existed. He nodded, absorbing this. I'm trying to find him again too, he said quietly. The book project progressed through the summer. Working with a ghostwriter, I recounted my journey from waitress to restaurant owner to bankruptcy to renaissance. The process was sometimes painful, requiring me to revisit low moments and difficult emotions, but also unexpectedly healing. Articulating the lessons from each phase of my life helped me integrate them into a coherent narrative, not just a series of successes and failures. Marcus and Vanessa read early drafts of the chapters concerning our estrangement. Neither asked for changes or softening, though I could see the reading was difficult for them. It's strange, Vanessa commented after finishing the manuscript. Seeing yourself through someone else's eyes, especially when you don't like what you see. The person described here, Marcus added, that's not who I want to be anymore. It's good to have this record, this reminder of who I was at my worst. It helps me recognize those patterns when they try to resurface. By early fall, the book was completed and scheduled for spring publication. The foundation continued to thrive, with 14 women now supported through grants and mentorship. Vanessa's exhibition of work by underrepresented female artists opened at a respected gallery, drawing positive reviews and meaningful attendance. Not just the social elite collecting status symbols, but people genuinely interested in the artists and their stories. One crisp October evening, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Chen, my former executive chef who had taken over 3 of the original Eleanor's Diner's locations after the bankruptcy. Eleanor, he began, his voice vibrating with excitement. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Why don't you answer your emails anymore? I laughed. I've been busy with the foundation. What's going on, Thomas? The Eleanor's concept, it's working again. The 3 locations are profitable, even in this economy. I've had investors approach about expansion opportunities. He paused. I want you involved, Eleanor. Not just your name, but you. Your vision, your experience. As a partner. I sat down, stunned by the unexpected proposition. Thomas, I'm flattered, but that chapter of my life is closed. I've moved on to different work now. Just come see what we're doing, he urged. The original location in Queens. We've revitalized it while keeping your core menu, your values. The community has responded incredibly well. Curiosity won out. The following Sunday, I asked Marcus, Vanessa, and Sophia to join me for a visit to the original Eleanor's Diner in Queens. the location above which Marcus and I had lived during those early, struggling years. As we approached the familiar corner, I was struck by both the changes and the continuity. The signage had been refreshed, but still featured the distinctive script of the original logo. The windows were brighter, the facade freshly painted, but the essential character remained intact. Inside, the space hummed with Sunday morning energy. Families sharing pancakes, couples lingering over coffee, servers moving efficiently between tables. Thomas spotted us immediately and hurried over, greeting me with a warm embrace before leading us to a reserved booth. "What do you think?" he asked eagerly. I looked around, taking in the updated decor that somehow still evoked the warmth of the original concept. "It feels right," I admitted. "Different, but with the same heart." Thomas beamed. "That's exactly what we've aimed for, honoring the foundation you built while evolving for today's market." As we enjoyed a breakfast of familiar recipes with subtle, modern updates, I found myself unexpectedly moved. This place, the first building block of what had become a substantial enterprise before crumbling, hadn't disappeared. It had evolved, adapted, found new relevance. "Mom," Marcus said, watching me closely, "you're crying." I touched my cheek, surprised to find it damp. "Just remembering," I said. "You used to do homework at that corner table while I calculated the day's receipts." He followed my gaze, recognition softening his features. "I remember that. You'd let me have a chocolate milkshake if I finished my math problems without complaining." After breakfast, Thomas showed us the kitchen, modernized but still recognizable, and then led us upstairs to what had once been our tiny apartment. "We've converted it to office and storage space," he explained, unlocking the door. "But I kept something I thought you might want to see." The living area was indeed now an office, but on one wall hung a large framed photograph, a much younger me, standing proudly in front of the diner on opening day, little Marcus perched on my hip. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice catching. "It was in the storage room when I took over the location," Thomas explained. "I thought it should be preserved. This is where it all began, after all." I stared at that long-ago version of myself, exhausted but determined, full of hope and ambition, holding my son close as we embarked on an uncertain future together. "We've come full circle," I said softly, more to myself than anyone else, we prepared to leave. Thomas pulled me aside for a private conversation. "The partnership offer stands, Eleanor. No pressure, but we could do something special together. Not recreating the past, but building something new on that foundation." "Let me think about it," I said, surprising myself. Until that moment, I'd been certain my restaurant days were behind me. On the cab ride back to Manhattan, Sophia fell asleep on my lap while Marcus and Vanessa discussed the experience in quiet voices. "It was strange being back there," Marcus admitted. "I have these fragmented memories of that apartment, that neighborhood, things I haven't thought about in decades." "It was so small," Vanessa marveled. "I can't imagine raising a child in that tiny space." "We were happy there," I reminded him. "We didn't need much." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I remember most? The certainty that we were a team, you and me. That no matter what happened, we'd figure it out together." He met my eyes. "I lost sight of that for a long time, I'm sorry." It wasn't the first apology he'd offered in recent months, but something about this one, delivered in the context of revisiting our shared beginnings, felt especially meaningful. "We're finding our way back," I said, gently stroking Sophia's hair as she slept. "That's what matters now. I'll edit parts 10-14 to be approximately 500 words each while maintaining the key story elements." November brought crisp air and early sunsets. I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating Thomas's partnership offer alongside my foundation work and upcoming book release. At 66, I hadn't expected to face such significant life decisions again. The possibility of returning to the restaurant business stirred something I had thought dormant. The entrepreneurial energy that had driven me for decades, the satisfaction of creating environments where people gathered to share food and connection. One evening, James Whitaker called with surprising news. "Eleanor, your offshore accounts have performed exceptionally well this year. Combined with your domestic investments and modest withdrawals, you're actually wealthier now than when you lost the business." I smiled at the irony. Financial success? In retirement after business failure. Not the trajectory I expected. "That's the point," James continued. "You're not actually retired in the traditional sense. Between the foundation work and now this potential restaurant partnership, you're as active as many people half your age." His observation stayed with me. What truly brought me fulfillment now? The foundation work was meaningful, creating opportunities for women facing challenges I had overcome decades earlier. But Thomas's offer had awakened something different, a direct creative impulse, the desire to build something tangible again. The following weekend, Marcus visited while Vanessa attended a gallery event. As Sophia played with art supplies in the guest room, Marcus and I sat on the balcony despite the November chill. "You seem preoccupied, Mom," he observed. "Everything okay?" I shared Thomas's offer and my conflicted feelings about potentially returning to the restaurant industry. "I thought that chapter was closed," I admitted. "I've been building a different kind of life these past months." Marcus considered this thoughtfully. "When I was in therapy, something the therapist said really stuck with me. He asked why I assumed life should follow a linear narrative: education, career, family, retirement, end of story. Why not cyclical patterns? Why not returns to earlier interests with new perspective?" His insight surprised me. "That's a profound way to look at it." "I think you should consider Thomas's offer," he continued. "Not because you need it financially or have something to prove, but because it clearly energizes you. Your eyes light up differently when you talk about it." Throughout November, I met regularly with Thomas, touring operating locations, reviewing financials, discussing his vision for expansion. The more involved I became, the more I recognized the opportunity wasn't just to rebuild something from my past, but to create something entirely new, a business model incorporating lessons of both success and failure. "What if," I suggested during one planning session, "we integrated the foundation's mission directly into the business model? Training pathways specifically designed for women facing barriers to entrepreneurship?" Thomas's eyes lit up. "A restaurant group that doubles as an incubator for future women restaurateurs. I love it." By early December, I had made my decision. I would join Thomas as a partner in the revitalized Eleanor's concept, focusing on developing the training program for aspiring women entrepreneurs. The foundation would continue its grant work with modified scope, creating synergy between philanthropic support and practical business training. This wasn't a return to the past, but evolution toward something more meaningful, a legacy not just of successful restaurants, but of transformed lives. By early spring, the revitalized Eleanor's concept had taken solid form. Thomas and I finalized plans for measured expansion, not the rapid growth that had ultimately contributed to my previous company's vulnerability, but a sustainable approach focused on quality and community integration. We developed the framework for the Eleanor Turner Culinary Leadership Program, an intensive training initiative for women facing barriers to entrepreneurship in the restaurant industry. 6 participants per cohort, I explained to the foundation board. 18 months of hands-on training across all aspects of restaurant operations. Graduates emerge not just with skills, but with a professional network and possible investment. Backing. The board approved the partnership unanimously. Meredith, our most skeptical member, even added, "This is exactly the kind of innovative collaboration philanthropy needs, leveraging business expertise while maintaining focus on social impact." Marcus had been surprisingly engaged with the business model development, offering insights from his corporate strategy background. When I shared the news of the board's approval, he surprised me further. "I've been thinking about getting more directly involved," he said hesitantly. "The financial literacy component of your training program. I could develop modules on restaurant accounting, cash flow management, capital planning, areas where many new businesses struggle." His offer represented his first proactive step toward supporting my work, rather than merely accepting it. I welcomed his contribution, touched by this tangible evidence of our healing relationship. Summer brought the first cohort of 6 women to the training program, each with a compelling story and untapped potential. I spent time with each cohort member, sharing not just professional guidance, but my personal journey of setbacks and reinvention. My book, Rebuilding: From Restaurant Empire to Personal Renaissance, was published in August. The response exceeded expectations, with particularly strong reception among women entrepreneurs and people navigating midlife reinventions. Marcus and Vanessa supported the book's release despite its honest portrayal of our estrangement. "It's our story, too," Marcus said after reading the final version. "The parts that don't reflect well on us are still true." For Sophia's 4th birthday, in September, we held a celebration at the original Queen's Diner, a full-circle moment. As Sophia blew out her candles, surrounded by family, restaurant staff, and training program participants, I felt a profound sense of integration. The various chapters of my life, personal and professional, past and present, no longer seemed like separate stories, but interconnected threads of a single narrative. That fall, the James Beard Foundation invited me to feature our training program at their gala, calling it an innovative approach to addressing systemic barriers in the industry. I accepted on the condition that our cohort members would attend as well. "This is about their future," I insisted, "not my past." As winter approached, I reflected on the year's transformation. The woman who had once been thrown out by her son, who had lost a business empire built over decades, now stood at the center of a different kind of success. One measured not in profit margins or market share, but in lives changed, relationships healed, and possibilities created for others. One crisp October evening, as I walked home along the Battery Park Promenade, after a foundation meeting, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Eleanor Turner?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Yes, it is. This is Richard Turner, your ex-husband." I stopped walking, genuinely shocked. We hadn't spoken in over 30 years, not since Marcus was in elementary school. "Richard," I managed. "This is unexpected." "I know," he acknowledged. "I've been following your story in the press. The book, the foundation, the new restaurants. It's impressive, Eleanor. Truly." "Thank you," I said, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I'm in New York for a few days," he continued. "I wondered if you might be willing to meet. For coffee, perhaps. Just to talk." The request took me by surprise. Richard had been largely absent from Marcus's life after our divorce, providing sporadic child support but little emotional presence. "May I ask why?" I said finally. "After all this time?" There was a pause on the line. "Perspective changes with age," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make amends where I can. You deserve that much, at least." We arranged to meet at a neutral cafe the following day. When Richard arrived, I barely recognized him. The handsome young musician with flowing hair had been replaced by a slender man with silver hair cropped short, moving with the careful gait of someone managing chronic pain. "I've been sober for 12 years, he explained after initial awkward greetings. "Part of recovery is making amends to people you've harmed. I've owed you that conversation for a very long time." He described his gradual decline after our divorce, from promising guitarist to unreliable session musician to homeless addict, before a music teacher in New Orleans offered help and a chance to rebuild. Now he taught music at a community arts program in Louisville. About 6 months ago, Marcus contacted me, Richard admitted later in our conversation. After your reconciliation, he was doing personal work, therapy, trying to understand his own behavior patterns. He wanted to meet. This was unexpected. Marcus had never mentioned reaching out to Richard. We met twice, Richard continued. I answered his questions about our marriage, about why I left. He was trying to understand the patterns he had repeated in his own relationships. Before we parted, Richard offered a check for $50,000. My share of Marcus's education with interest. I know it's decades late and you managed without it, but… Richard, I interrupted gently, pushing the envelope back. I don't need this money. It's not about need, he insisted. It's about accountability. I suggested he donate it to the Foundation's Child Care Support Fund for single mothers in the training program instead. He agreed readily, seeming relieved by this resolution. That evening, I called Marcus and shared my meeting with Richard, including his disclosure about their previous contact. I was going to tell you, Marcus said apologetically. I just needed time to process it all first. You don't owe me explanations about your relationship with him, I assured him. He's your father. That connection is yours to explore in whatever way makes sense to you. He's my biological father, Marcus corrected. But you were both mother and father to me growing up. I never want you to doubt that I understand the difference. As we ended the call, I felt deep appreciation for the man Marcus was becoming. Thoughtful, self-aware, capable of holding complexity rather than retreating to simplified narratives. His willingness to engage with the messiness of real relationships represented growth far beyond what I had dared to hope for a year earlier. February arrived with crystalline skies and temperatures that made the harbor waters seem to steam in the morning light. As the James Beard Foundation ceremony approached, I found myself unexpectedly nervous, not about public speaking, but about the message itself. How could I distill the profound lessons of the past 2 years into a brief acceptance speech? 1. Week before the event, I invited Marcus to join me for lunch at the original Queen's Diner to discuss my concerns. I'm struggling with this speech, I admitted. It needs to be more than just thanking the foundation or explaining our program. Marcus studied me thoughtfully. What's the heart of what you want to convey? That failure, even catastrophic, public failure, isn't the end unless we decide it is. That sometimes our greatest innovations emerge from our deepest disappointments. That legacy isn't just what we build, but how we respond when what we've built crumbles. That's powerful, he said, and authentic to your experience. But not preachy, I added. I don't want to sound like I'm delivering life lessons from on high. Marcus smiled. Mom, your entire approach is the opposite of preachy. You've always taught through example, not lecture. Just tell your story. The bankruptcy, the family estrangement, the foundation, the program. The lessons are embedded in the narrative. His insight calmed my uncertainty. My task wasn't to extract and present the wisdom separately, but to share the journey in a way that allowed others to find their own meaning within it. The night of the ceremony arrived cold and clear. The ballroom was filled with the culinary elite, renowned chefs, restaurateurs, food writers, and industry leaders. Our table near the front included Thomas, Marcus, and Vanessa, 2 board members from the foundation, and Darlene representing the training program participants. When my name was called, I walked to the podium amid warm applause and began my speech with stark honesty. 2 years ago, I stood in an attorney's office signing bankruptcy papers for the restaurant company I had built over 4 decades. That evening, I went to my son's home, hoping for temporary shelter while I regrouped. He turned me away. I continued, describing the foundation's establishment, the development of the culinary leadership program, and the integration of business, practice with social mission. The restaurant industry celebrates innovation, virtuosity, and excellence. These are worthy aspirations. But perhaps we might also celebrate resilience, reinvention, and the courage to begin again after devastating setbacks. Perhaps our definition of success could expand to include not just who rises to the top, but who reaches back to lift others once they've arrived. As I returned to our table amid standing applause, Marcus embraced me tightly. "Perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." After the ceremony, Darlene appeared at my side, her expression serious. "Listening to your speech made me realize I've never properly thanked you, not just for the training opportunity, but for what you modeled. Seeing someone rebuild after losing everything, it gave me permission to believe I could do the same, as we prepared to leave. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders against the February chill. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined us here, not just at this ceremony, but in this relationship. I thought some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. So did I admitted. "I'm grateful to have been proven wrong," he said simply. 1 year after the James Beard Awards ceremony, I stood in the open kitchen of our newest Eleanor's location, watching the controlled chaos of a busy Saturday service. The restaurant, our fifth since beginning the revitalization, occupied a light-filled corner space in a historically underserved neighborhood, experiencing thoughtful revitalization. What made this location special was that Zaria Jackson, a graduate of our first training cohort, had been installed as managing partner. At 34, with previous experience limited to line cooking positions, she had blossomed through the program into a confident, creative leader capable of running a complex operation. "How's it feeling?" I asked, joining her at the pass where she inspected each dish. "Busy but smooth," she replied, making a minor adjustment to a plate. "The new spring menu items are getting great feedback." The collaboration with the legendary chef who had approached me at the award ceremony had evolved into a nationwide mentorship network, with established restaurateurs providing guidance and occasionally investment capital to program graduates, ready to launch their own concepts. My foundation had expanded its focus as well, now offering childcare subsidies and housing assistance alongside direct business support. This more holistic approach recognized that entrepreneurial success for women, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, required addressing practical obstacles beyond simply business knowledge. At 68, I had gradually scaled back my day-to-day operational involvement, transitioning to a more strategic advisory role. Thomas handled most of the restaurant group's expansion decisions, while a capable executive director managed the foundation's growing initiatives. This evolution wasn't retirement. I still participated actively in major decisions, taught regularly in the training program, and maintained relationships with key funders and partners. But it represented a deliberate shift toward succession planning, toward ensuring that the work would continue beyond my direct involvement. My personal life had found its own balanced rhythm. Regular family dinners with Marcus, Vanessa, and Sophia, now nearly 6 and fiercely independent, anchored my weeks. My relationship with Richard had evolved into a cordial, occasionally friendly connection. Not close, but healing in its way for all involved. As I prepared to leave the restaurant that evening, Zaria walked me to the door. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, hesitating slightly. "The community cooking classes we discussed. I'd like to implement them here, focusing on healthy cooking on a limited budget. Would the foundation consider providing startup funding?" "Send me a proposal," I replied. "But I think it aligns perfectly with our mission." She nodded, then added more quietly, "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life, that I get to create something meaningful, not just execute someone else's vision." Her words echoed my own reflections from that difficult period after the bankruptcy, the rediscovery of agency after loss, the freedom found in starting anew without the weight of others' expectations. Walking home along the harbor as sunset painted the water in shades of gold and rose, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Not the completion of a journey, but the satisfaction of having found the right path after periods of painful disorientation. My son had thrown me out when my business failed, never imagining the resources, both financial and spiritual, I had in reserve. From that moment of profound rejection had emerged not just personal recovery, but a ripple effect of opportunity for others, of healed relationships, of meaningful impact extending far beyond anything I could have accomplished alone. On my 70th birthday, I woke before dawn and made my way to the roof terrace of my building. The city was still mostly dark, lights twinkling across the skyline as the first hint of sunrise began to color the eastern horizon. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders against the morning chill and settled into a comfortable chair, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 7 restaurants now operated under the Eleanor's banner, each with a training program graduate in a leadership position. The foundation supported over 40 women entrepreneurs annually across various initiatives. My book had been translated into 12 languages, reaching readers far beyond the culinary world who found resonance in its themes of resilience and reinvention. Marcus and Vanessa had welcomed a second child 2 years earlier, a boy they named James after my father. Sophia, now 8, had appointed herself his protector and guide, explaining the world to him with the confident authority only an older sibling can muster. As the sun broke fully above the horizon, painting the harbor in shimmering gold, I considered what wisdom I might offer if asked to distill the lessons of my journey. Not just my professional successes and failures, but the deeper human experience of betrayal, reconciliation, and renewal. Perhaps this: our true wealth is never just financial. Money can provide security, options, and comfort, all valuable things. But resilience, purpose, creativity, relationships, these are the assets that truly sustain us through life's inevitable cycles of loss and renewal. Or this: the story is never truly over until we decide it is. A business failure, a family estrangement, a devastating betrayal. These are painful chapters, but they need not be the conclusion of our narrative. There is always the possibility of a new beginning, even when we cannot yet imagine what form it might take. Or perhaps most importantly, our greatest setbacks often contain hidden gifts, the stripping away of external identity that allows us to rediscover our essential selves, the collapse of old structures that create space for more meaningful constructions, the pain that, properly channeled, can become the foundation for new purpose. As the city fully awakened below me, traffic, increasing, joggers appearing along the harbor path, ferry boats beginning their daily crossings, I felt profoundly grateful. Not just for the material comfort that my offshore accounts had provided during my darkest hour, but for the opportunity that crisis had created to rebuild with greater intention, to realign my actions with my deepest values. My phone chimed with an incoming message, Marcus, confirming our birthday dinner plans for that evening. The simple text ended with words that still had the power to move me deeply. Love you, Mom. Today and always. The money my son didn't know about had saved me from immediate hardship when he turned me away. But what had truly transformed both our lives was not financial security, but the courage to face difficult truths, to allow pain to become wisdom, to rebuild relationships with honesty and intention. That was the fortune truly worth preserving. The wealth that grows rather than diminishes when shared, that creates rather than consumes, that builds legacy not through accumulation, but through contribution. A fortune available to anyone with the courage to begin again, regardless of their bank balance, when life delivers its inevitable moments of profound disappointment or unexpected opportunity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.